Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. Thanks for taking your time out of your day to join our webinar, What's New in PICO, a preview of our 2026 product roadmap. Our speaker and presenter today will be our head of product, Steve Wishau. He's going to talk about everything we have in store for this coming year, and I will let Steve take it over.
Thanks, Shayna. Welcome, everybody. We're looking forward to diving into some of our upcoming features here. I know there's a decent amount to get through here. We're going to be kind of toggling between a few different slides and some interactive work here just to talk about some of our upcoming features and upgrades to the product. But I want to start with a recap of where we just wrapped up. We wrapped up with 41 new device integrations, and that's across a variety of different things, ranging from new torque tool models and brands, some barcode scanners, readers, printers, testers, sensors, and machines. Machines is actually quite a big category because we significantly overhauled our machine actions upgrade. To PICO at the end of last year to interact with a variety of different equipment. So for those of you on Ignition or Kepware-driven OPC UA servers, we can interact with a variety of machines so that one catch-all integration catches quite a bit of the automation equipment that we've seen in the last year or so. And we've also upgraded a few different aspects of our information. I already mentioned the simplified machine integrations in SCADA for reading, writing, and interacting with machines in that way. But we've done a lot of work on importing work instructions, taking your content and getting into a format that makes sense. And we've done some education and webinars in that department as well as product level templates and variants to make sure that we are configuring and mapping to the high mix environments on your shop floors. I want to call out NetSuite ERP integration again. ERPs are a never-ending journey, but we've done some good work on upgrading our NetSuite connector as well. Those of you actively using that can look forward to seeing some additional updates on that subject as we continue to refine and upgrade the APIs available coming out of PICO. Importantly, we wanted to know what features you all were looking for simplifying your assembly operations. A lot of that did revolve around the work instructions that we created. So we want to customize that image similar to the PowerPoints and Google Slides of the world, assist on that work instruction creation to really make sure that we are importing using the right content available to us, as well as automating some work order logic from those product workflows. We have all that content available for us. How do we properly order and execute against that? So all those API upgrades that I just mentioned about making sure we're using the right tools to be able to say, this is the sequence of events. Is that a waterfall of operations and an upstream, downstream dependent flow? Or do we want to be a little bit more prescriptive on when those sub-assemblies come into the flow? We've heard a lot about spreadsheet-based scheduling. We've documented some Google Sheet integrations that some of you may have seen to be able to really bring in some level of the spreadsheets, the Excel world that we're used to, and flowing that into a system in a very simple way instead of that top level ERP integration that takes a little bit more time, a little bit more complicated, has a lot more business systems involved. We're highlighting a few of these other options as well between the multilingual options, Jira integration, and more systems integrations. And we'll be talking about the multilingual options for worker guidance later in this presentation, as well as the Jira integration. But that BOM line item for the library of BOM items is important as well. So we want to make sure that we're replacing all those locations that part numbers use, and we'll be continuing to upgrade our BOM functionality and reporting throughout the year. Of course, when we're talking about manufacturing tech stacks, no conversations are complete without more systems integration. So we're continuing to work through your requests and the items coming down the pipeline, and we'll touch on that as well. So what are PICO's New Year's resolutions? It's not a January webinar without talking about this, right? We want to make sure that we have that clear operator guidance for growing and making sure that diverse workforce is being able to interact with those instructions properly. It's been part of our thesis for a while to make sure that when we are documenting our work instructions appropriately, it's accessible to everyone from, today's my second day on the manufacturing line up to I've been here for 10, 20, 30 years. I need to be able to interact with systems in a similar way. So when we start talking about these integrations, how do we make sure that those integrations and work instructions are available to every operator on skill level and language? And we want to make sure that our error-proofing capabilities remain strong, communicating with tools, the automotive approach of no-fault forwarding. How do we continue to double down on that and say we are doing the right thing? We're not pushing known rework, known bad parts forward, and make sure those quality checks are in place, specifically coming from those machines. So whether that's automation equipment, cameras, torque tools, whatever that feedback is from that operator, again, augmenting those instructions, we want to make sure our error proofing is strong as well. Finally, we want to make sure that simple configuration of the work instructions and integrations is still possible. We don't want to be a code-heavy interface. We don't want to be doing the same integrations over and over again at each station, replicating that work. We want to make sure that we are not doing the same thing over and over again without code to be able to configure our products and workflows appropriately. So the first item that we want to talk about here is a streamlined process logic. And this is, adding functions or other actions to the digital work instructions. For you PICO users today, this is available as part of device scripts that are all tied to measure actions today. We want to make sure that this is a lot more both intuitive, easier to use, and not having to go through and set up custom scripts and devices for these very repeatable actions. So I'll be going through a quick interactive demo here to talk about some of these actions that we want to highlight, which is generating serial numbers, combining those attributes, parsing upstream actions to make sure that we're capturing the relevant information, creating timestamps or date codes, timers, mathematical functions, and anything else that we might need here are all going to be available as part of this process logic. So I'm going to toggle over to my interactive piece here to talk through some of these actions available. So one of this is generating that serial number. Again, this is typically on a scan action or a measure action today. When we go into the generate serial number category, there's a variety of different options here for us. So of course, we want to label our action appropriately, but if there's a upstream scan that we want to factor in or a date or a sequence, we can bring in these items appropriately to start using a combination of either static text or dates or sequences to be able to essentially combine our serial number on the fly. Typically, this is done with a variety of programming or logic scripts today, but we want this to be a configurable format. So when we're generating our assembly, we have our sequence number, of course, for that incrementing number. But if we want to throw in additional static text or date codes, all of that content is there for us. And again, that most important thing here that we want to mark this as the PICO serial number that we're actively building on and working on to be able to continue supporting our structure. Another item is that parsing serial number. It's a very similar item where if we have a upstream scan action that we want to parse something out, that regex pattern that we might be putting in that device pattern, for those of you that are unfamiliar with regular expression patterns, it's essentially calling out a specific number of digits or a static text. This is a very code heavy one, but functionally what it's doing is parsing out a relevant section of information. And of course, the PICO support team is available to support on best practices on creating these, as well as there's a large library of examples within the Resource Center to make sure we're configuring the right action available. For those of you that are doing expiration checks, it's a very similar concept to our parse, but instead of just checking for a specific pattern, we want to make sure that that value that we're checking out is matching a valid format. So we want to make sure, let's say we're scanning a bottle of Loctite or adhesive, that this is a relevant to our operation. It's not expired. So we're going to be checking, is this bottle still good? Can I use it in my operation? And is it relevant for my status. So this is effectively saying, checking against an upstream scan action, is this serial number correct? And is it before today's date? So it's just kind of a logical modifier to make sure we are using the right thing. And this can apply to other things besides consumables, of course, but it's just a way for us to automatically check that as part of action config. Another item, go back here, is to generate that date code. Similar to the serial number expression, we might just need a valid date that we want to put a timestamp on this separate from our serial number. Of course, that's an option as well, that we can specify what date format we want to use in whatever format and pattern we want to do. For those that are interested in using some math actions, this is where things can get as complicated or as simple as you'd like. So on the measurement action today, we have the ability to put on some math scripts, and all of those are individually configurable for each item. But now we can start talking in the context of each process where he's putting these in. So if we have an upstream action that's doing these things, we can see that there is a standard calculation that we want to do, and we can start factoring in different unit of measurements, precisions, values to make sure it's in the right minimum and maximum threshold. But this just allows us to take our process parameters, either captured by a machine, something as simple as calipers, that if we are fitting this measurement into a additional state future on that we need to do some mathematical functions on it, we can perform that as well to capture the content as we would expect. Finally, our timer here is what you would expect it to be, and that this is a standard countdown timer, right? Again, eliminating those individual devices for all those 1 to 5 minute timers that you might need for each process in your sequence. This is just allowing us to create that function here to say, don't advance until X number of time has been reached. This can be configured to be operating in the background or be able to force this process to keep up. Importantly, this doesn't take away the function of the upstream process check. For those that are familiar, this is a slightly different functionality of make sure that process upstream completed 2 hours ago, 12 hours ago, 24 hours ago. Important for those. A good example, epoxy cure time, that we want to make sure that everything is cured and ready for production in that setting. This is just a simple countdown timer, but that functionality will be here for us as well. So I'm going to go back to our presentation here and move on to the next function. So we want to talk about primarily torque tool, calibration, and preventative maintenance. So as part of our focus on that error proofing and integration with precision fastening devices, we want to enable the ability to track both calibration and maintenance cycles. I know a lot of you may have a QMS or a system that tracks this already. Why this is important from the PICO side is that all of these items here are available to build on the shop floor. So those of you that are familiar, we assign our tools and devices to processes, to stations that are capable of doing work. We want to be able to have the option of locking out these devices that are not calibrated, are too far beyond their preventative maintenance cycles. This is usually just a lubricant, making sure that the tool's functioning as expected. But in the quality environments that need these tools to be rigorous to make sure we are fastening correctly, all of these items are essentially an option to lock out that tool, disable the open protocol when we get to that step. Of course, we don't want to disable these tools when we get to that step on the day of, because that's too late to actually do the work that we need to calibrate or do that maintenance. This allows us to add in some logic to both lock out the tool or provide notifications to when these tools are available. Primarily, we want to focus on just give me a specific date. I want to calibrate these tools every 6 months. Alternatively, we can track these, every 40,000 rundowns, whatever number that is, to you for these devices, we can make sure that's the case. For those that are in high torque versus low torque environments, these values might range, because if you're constantly slamming bolts down at a very, very high torque range, regardless of the number of cycles. You probably want to be checking that because those are high stress joints on that tool. So this is flexible based on the type of tool and configurable to your team to really enable the options of calibrating these appropriately for ensuring our tools are in a good state before we continue to use a tool that might be out of sync and then have to go back and do a analysis on which potential products were affected by a tool that may or may not have been out of calibration. I mentioned Jira earlier in the presentation here. We want to enhance the PICO notes, which is on the left side of the image here, of really capturing any defects for an external ticketing system. Whether it's Jira or other systems, those types of ticketing methodologies do a great job of capturing the information at the point of use. If we've got these great work instructions and a seamless experience for the operator, we don't want them to have to worry about switching tabs, going to an ERP and making a non-conformance report or writing things down on a ticket to be filed later or pulling up a different tab and going into Jira directly. When we're in PICO, we can have a pre-selected list of options. All of those that are familiar with our customizable quality codes can essentially pick that sequence of events to be able to say, this is what's damaged, this is what's broken, and we can generate those quality notes directly in Jira. So when we start talking about, these ticketing systems, we want to make sure that it's aligned with your Jira Epic, which is the top level. You can see an example on the right-hand side that it's my manufacturing Epic that's going to create an issue or a ticket that's associated with serial number 14283 as part of this defect. So, when I was installing this wheel on the bicycle, for example, it was damaged or broken. So I'm effectively filing a non-conformance ticket under scrap code 1.1. Again, this is just an example, but this allows us to start tracking those items. And it's a one-way push to those external systems for you to be able to see what station, what operator, what process, what step, if there's a work order, manufacturing order associated with it, and most importantly, that serial number. All of these items can be associated with that ticket, so you don't have to have the operator spending time, who they are, the time, the date. All of those things are going to be automatically captured as part of that build process, and not let me build this thing into a stopping point, set it down, then go into Jira or ask my supervisor to make a ticket. This is all that live tracking of things that's happening, and then you can allow your choice as the user of this to say, stop the build right here, I've created a non-conformance issue, or is this a flag for later and just needs to be addressed before, for example, this bicycle leaves the building. So there's a lot of ways to handle this, but primarily this is intended to be your preference of managing the intake of non-conformances, process inefficiencies, quality concerns, whatever those node categories are, those will be reflected here. Similarly, this goes to part substitutions, deviation tracking. It all ties back to Jira directly, and we can associate the Jira ticket number on the PICO side as well. Finally, as part of our first half preview here, I want to talk about multi-language support. This is a pretty big undertaking for those of you that are familiar with translations, but this allows us both localization and multi-language support. And localization meaning time and date reflecting accurately, presenting numbers, things as simple as commas or periods when we're referencing large strings of information and digits. This allows us to capture the information directly. And you can see the planned languages in the first version of this here, but this effectively allows us to set a pre-configuration or an option for all of our operators and users as expected. So we want to be careful with this because if we are, let's go under the assumption that we are a primarily English-speaking facility, that we are creating these instructions in English. We want to make sure that the auto translation mechanism we're using, to call things out on the slide here, products, stations, devices, change control, traceability, list design, data analytics, all the PICO productized words, those are a lot more streamlined to translate. That's all built into the product when we're talking about a user basis. which I'll get into in just a second. But all of your text, your being customer entered text, user entered text in this group here, we don't want to make too many assumptions about that translation. So yes, we have a pre-populated list here, but we want to be very intentional about that in translation. So anytime that you do translate your work instructions, you'll get a modal that says, hey, just an FYI, we're using this translation engine. We're gonna do a best effort on the action names and the text you've entered here, but we highly recommend you go through stress test with language speaking folks that you are translating into, just to confirm that that's all good. Language translations are getting better. Certainly it's improved since I started in manufacturing more than 10 years ago, but this capability is still important enough that we don't want to lose any of that technical expertise that you all are putting into your work instructions and lose some intent, lose some meaning, because that auto translation needs to holistically look at it and not lose any specific piece here. I know I'm being a little bit specific and pedantic about this, but it is important because we don't want to lose any of that specific content that you all have put into your work instructions. So there's a couple options here of being able to do this. We have the user dropdown as well. But when we talk about the language dropdown for all of our users, we have the ability to see all of these languages, as you can see on the screen here, to be able to toggle down between these languages accessible within the platform here. So all these planned languages that are listed here are part of the expected first release that we're focusing on, but we want to ensure that all this content is here for us in the way that you would expect it to. So again, really doubling down on talking about, yes, translations are available and the platform can be used to support multi-language, but all of that content does need to be verified in some capacity to make sure that auto translation best effort is functioning in the way that we expect it to. So a few different additional upgrades and new integrations to talk about here. We have our product history report, which is an improvement on our existing feature that when we're downloading build process summaries and downloading a flat file or an Excel file, we want to make sure we're containing all that consumed bill of materials. So we're surfacing anything that is part of that BOM, all the parts there. So anything that is completed through the first half of that process, we want to ensure that all of that material, including substitutions, missing parts, non-conformances, are all logged as part of that build. We also have two additional items here on supervisor approval on failed results. So let's say we have some very specific precision fastening that anytime we have a failed torque, we want the supervisor to come and approve any of these items to be able to say that, yes, I've reset the tool, you're clear to proceed for those very either critical to quality torques or high scrap sensitivity operations. We have the ability to lock those out on a more rigid basis. We also have a new feature that we're calling linked action groups. For those familiar with our list view, we can group scan actions, serial number generations, prints all together, so we can reset, skip, bypass all of those actions or steps in one go. So when all these actions are grouped together, let's say I'm scanning something, generating a date code, printing a barcode and scanning that barcode to make sure it's all good. If something goes wrong there, I don't want to have to go and reset all of those at the same time. I can essentially skip that group or reset that group all in one go. Similarly, if I have a group of precision fastening actions to put on a subassembly or a bracket of multiple parts, if I know that I'm waiting until later until those parts or that subassembly is available, I can group all of those actions together to say, as a supervisor, I'm going to skip this chunk right here and come back later to be able to group those together. Finally, just want to highlight some of the systems integrations here. I did mention Jira, but a couple of the ERPs that we're going to be focusing on. Genius ERP is approaching the finish line, and everyone's favorite Microsoft Dynamics 365, both Business Central and Finance and Operations, are on our short-term roadmap as well. So next steps, existing users, all of these product features are included on your subscriber plans that we talked about, separate from the integration. So all of those upgraded product features, specifically, language action config is all available as part of those plans that you're currently on. Anybody that's interested in learning more can schedule a demo with us on our website, picomes.com/demo. And upcoming soon, we have a new webinar about how we can take some of those insights and shop floor data that we've collected into actionable insights and talking about BI tools that are available. So you can register for that as well on our website or across our social media platforms. So with that, I think now would be a good time to jump into a few different questions.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. We have a couple of questions here. First one is, when are these features going to be available?
Yeah, I would expect to see these features available the first half of this year. They'll be kind of waterfalling around each other, and certainly this isn't the entire list of things we'll be working on, but this is kind of the preview of our first half of the year, and I think we can all look forward to doing this again 6 months from now.
Okay, great. And will there be any more languages available in the multi-language feature?
Yeah, that's a great question. The initial batch of languages we're supporting is both primarily user driven and how we want to support our existing customers, but more importantly, to be able to enable them together is because they're all a similar language base. So it's a limit to the amount of, let's say, reconfiguring we have to do on our product. They're primarily left to right languages, Latin-based characters. The initial set beyond that is a kind of a next phase of product realignment to make sure all of the characters and presentation on the screen is as expected. But we want to make sure we are answering our customers' requests and giving them what they need. So we're taking that as our first batch.
Okay, great. We have one or two more, and if anybody else has questions, just go ahead and pop them into the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. But the next question we have is the quality ticketing feature limited to Jira, or can I integrate a different QMS or quality ticketing platform?
The intent of our Jira integration is to make it flexible. So of course, all of the Jira options, the standard structure is available, but frankly, if you have an additional QMS system that's interested in capturing that information, the APIs just need to be pointed elsewhere. So similar to our ERP integrations and how we track other, systems integrations, whether it's REST APIs or webhooks, we're more than happy to talk through integrating to other QMSs because we've set up kind of our structure here to say, send us the high level you want, and as long as you have those fields to land those relevant data points, we're happy to create those tickets elsewhere.
Okay, great. Last question. Will the action configuration refresh help me manage my custom devices?
Definitely. So a big intent is to limit the amount of devices that you have to individually configure. Of course, the custom scripts will always be there for you to enable specific actions that you want to be able to do or functions, but the goal there is to really reduce the amount of setup. And as I'm going through my work instructions, I want to make it as configurable and user-friendly as possible. So it really takes out a full layer of device assignment on those simple or maybe straightforward to think about, but maybe a little bit more complex to actually set up. So it's both ideally easier to set up and being able to configure directly. And I do see an additional question on this topic directly about how much the existing work instructions will change. Nothing will break updating to the new action config. There's no reason to change how it's currently going. The functionality will be exactly the same. It can either continue to work that way, that's also okay, or you can configure any net new actions over. We're more than happy to do migrations on the PICO side, just so there's no, fixing or cleanup work on your side to be able to do so. But the direction that we're heading in and is confirmed is it's essentially a parallel path. It's easier to use going forward, but the existing functions and acting and current action updates will be more than functional.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. I think that answers all the questions we had come in, and we're at time. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. This was recorded, and you'll be receiving a link to the recording within the next day or so. And there will be a very short survey that pops up as soon as we close the webinar. If you could just fill that out for us, it helps us tailor our future webinars to what you want to hear about. So thanks, Steve, and thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.